seeking more spending. Democrats unveil another coronavirus aid package. We're on Capitol Hill. Getting ready. Italy is preparing for masses to resume with the help from the Italian army. Trusting and confident. Pope Francis reminds the faithful of the components of a good Christian prayer. And honoring the Blessed Virgin. On the feast day of Our Lady of Fatima, we hear about an initiative regarding the Rosary. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, May 13th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight, the head of the Federal Reserve warned of a prolonged recession without more action. At the same time, President Donald Trump slammed China on Twitter, blaming the country for the loss of so many lives. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, here at the White House, President Trump has been trying to get the economy going again. That, of course, is no secret. Meanwhile, tonight, the Fed chair very worried about bankruptcies and extended unemployment as the shutdown lingers.
President Donald Trump took to Twitter today, writing, "As I have said for a long time, dealing with China is a very expensive thing to do. We just made a great trade deal. The ink was barely dry, and the world was hit by the plague from China. 100 trade deals wouldn't make up the difference, and all those innocent lives lost." Tweet comes as Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell warned of the threat of a prolonged recession.
Long stretches of unemployment can damage or end workers' careers as their skills lose value and professional networks dry up, and leave families in greater debt.
And the list of unknowns concerning the disease is long.
How quickly and sustainably will it be brought under control? Can new outbreaks be avoided as social distancing measures lapse? How long will it take for confidence to return and normal spending to resume?
But another major concern:
there are consequences that run the other way when we stay closed down as a country.
That includes people's mental health.
A hotline run by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services saw a 1,000% increase in responses during April as we kept this country closed.
And as states reopen, can they handle any flare-ups? Connecticut's governor says he's confident.
We have now 40% capacity in virtually all of our hospitals. So if there was a flare-up, we make sure we can take care of people. We're doubling our testing again next week. We got the biggest stockpile of PPE really in the region's history.
The Fed chair also says additional fiscal support could be costly but worth it if it helps ease long-term pain. Also tonight, the U.S. is warning that hackers backed by the Chinese government could be trying to steal research connected to vaccines and treatment and testing, but the Chinese say those accusations are unwarranted. Tracy?
Okay, thank you, Owen. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi unveils the Democrats' proposal for the next phase of coronavirus relief legislation. The massive $3 trillion legislative package is expected to come to a vote as early as Friday. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports now. Eric?
Well, Tracy, the House Democrats' latest bill includes a laundry list of items, including assistance to state and local governments, but it also includes other items such as forgiving student debt. And GOP leaders say that it includes, quote, a laundry list of ideas, a wish list from the liberal Democratic Party, and they're doing everything they can to stop it.
The House will be considering another massive economic bill to address the coronavirus's effect on the health of Americans and our economy.
As prayers ring out over the House floor, Democrats push for the new HEROES Act. This coronavirus aid bill includes approximately $1 trillion for aid to state, local, and tribal governments, another round of $1,200 payments to Americans, and approximately $200 billion for hazard pay to essential workers.
If we don't provide the resources that have been lost to the states and localities because of this pandemic, there will be cutbacks in pay and layoffs for sure. Is that how we're going to answer this national emergency?
But Republicans criticize the proposal for allocating money to areas they say are not critical to coronavirus recovery, like funds for voting by mail, for the U.S. Postal Service, and for food assistance.
Once the money we've already provided has been fully allocated, we'll have a better sense of where we might need to appropriate additional funds and where we spend enough.
The Senate turns to debate on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. The law gives U.S. intelligence agencies the power to spy on foreigners suspected of terrorism. Several Republicans want changes to protect Americans' privacy. Senator Rand Paul's amendment prevents the secret Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court from ordering surveillance of U.S. citizens. And it, quote, gives Americans spied on by the government the standing to sue in court. Without his amendment, Senator Paul says he will encourage President Trump to veto the bill. Senator Steve Daines and Ron Wyden backed a bipartisan amendment that, had it passed, would have protected Americans from warrantless searches of their online browsing records. Senator Mike Lee tells me that he's been concerned about FISA for a decade.
Look, they shouldn't be using Section 215 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to go after somebody's browsing records. If they want to get those through some other means, fine.
Republican Senator John Kennedy proposed a bill to give states more leeway on how they spend the money that's already been allocated from the original CARES Act. He was blocked by one Democrat. Republicans say that the way that the current House bill is written will never make it to the president's desk. Tracy?
Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reporting for us tonight. Thank you, Eric. President Donald Trump's former campaign manager has been released from prison. Paul Manafort is set to serve the rest of his sentence in home confinement over concerns from the coronavirus. His attorneys say that he was at high risk because of his age and pre-existing medical conditions. Manafort was serving more than 7 years after being convicted as part of the special counsel's investigation into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Austria announces the date it hopes to reopen its border with Germany. Chancellor Sebastian Kurz says the countries hope to resume complete border crossings by July 15th. Starting this Friday, however, the ban will be relaxed. He also says Vienna has been in contact with neighboring Switzerland, but free movement into Italy may not happen anytime soon. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says Britain is making progress in its fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, despite claims to the contrary from the opposition leader.
We are now in a position to make some small, modest steps to begin to come out of some of the very restrictive measures that we've had. I think people do understand what we're trying to do as a country. And as for the international comparisons that he seeks to draw now, I think he will have to contain his impatience.
Over the weekend, Johnson announced an easing of lockdown measures. He says his focus now is to continue to lower the number of cases in nursing homes. Cardinal Mark Willett, the prefect of the Vatican's Congregation for Bishops, says the church needs more women involved directly in priestly formation in seminaries. In an interview with the Vatican's Women's Magazine, the cardinal says that he believes the experience of collaborating with women on an equal level helps the candidate to envisage his future ministry and how he will respect and collaborate with them. Father Gregory Gaston, rector at the Pontifical Filipino College, joins us now from Rome. Father, thank you for joining us.
Hello, Tracy. Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Father, I'd like to ask you, what role do you see women having in priestly formation?
Well, I think we could start with Jesus himself, the high priest, our model, the source of our priesthood. So in Jesus' life, he was relating with women in different parts. Of course, his own mother, Mary. And in the gospel passages, we see a lot of women there playing vital roles. And also in the history of the church, we see a lot of women playing important roles. So I think this also has to be present in the formation, in the priestly formation, in the seminaries, with this idea that women are not only our, we could say, collaborators, but also we can learn a lot from women.
Father, do you think that Cardinal Willett's vision is plausible for the church?
Yes, I think Cardinal Willett mentioned that the women should play a greater role in the formation of the seminaries. And I think this actually has been starting, of course, in the past, in the olden times when the seminary started with the Council of Trent in the 1500s, especially 1600s, the seminaries developed. And at that time, well, the culture was a little different, and they had to try to limit the presence of women in the seminaries. But now with all this the different situations, then we could truly say that women could really give a lot to formation. And we could also add that we not only learn from them as something additional, but so many things that maybe only women could even teach us because of the complementary roles and characteristics of men and women.
Well, I'd like to switch gears just a little bit. Today, as you know, is the 39th anniversary of the assassination attempt of John Paul II. What's your memory of this modern-day saint?
Yes, actually, I was blessed enough to be ordained by Saint Pope John Paul II. That was way back in 1993, and we were a group there in Seville in Spain during the International Eucharistic Congress. And earlier, I also saw him during the World Meeting of Family, the World Youth Day there in Santiago de Compostela. That was my first time to see him. And I would always remember him as a very prayerful man. I would remember him as a living saint, we could say, because even the way he looks at you, the way he talks, the way he teaches, I really learned a lot from him. I was a seminarian back then in 1988 to 1993, so that was also the height of his a lot of teachings from the Pope that we learned in the seminaries.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Before I let you go, Father, I would like to ask you about the coronavirus pandemic. How has it impacted the college and also life in the Philippines?
Yes, well, here in Rome, in our college, we were able to implement the strict lockdown. So there's practically none of our students have left the college, have gone outside, maybe except for one or two during this past 2 months. And since Monday, we entered into phase 2 here in Italy, and we're still maintaining the lockdown. So we're all okay. Nobody got sick. So we're okay. In the Philippines, well, we have to pray a lot also because we have less facilities even for testing. So we don't really know how many are sick. And we also pray because the doctors, the nurses, the healthcare workers, I think those who got sick or those who died even, I think it's because they were overworked, they had no time to rest and so on. So let's pray. Let's continue to pray so that the coronavirus could be controlled there in the Philippines, here in Italy, and all over the world.
Well, Father, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. Father Gregory Gaston, Rector at the Pontifical Filipino College. Thank you again, Father.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, Pope Francis tells the faithful to remain close to the Lord at all times. And an update on an inflammatory disease affecting children and whether it's related to the coronavirus. Pope Francis stresses the importance of remaining close to our Lord at all times.
Lui rimane in noi. Non solo noi in lui.
At his daily mass, the Holy Father says our relationship with Jesus is a mutual bond. We need him to give us strength, and he needs us to be witnesses of Christian life, just like the vine and the branches need each other to bear fruit. The U.S. sits at the highest unemployment rate since the Great Depression, with roughly 30 million Americans out of work. Yet, despite the dismal numbers, there is hope for job seekers, as some positions are now in high demand. Correspondent Mark Irons reports.
Times are already tough, and some economists paint a bleak picture for the future.
Yeah, I think there's a very high likelihood that a lot of the so-called temporary job losses end up being permanent.
Millions of Americans are out of work, with families desperate for a paycheck.
We need food. My son-in-law's laid off, my daughter-in-law's laid off, and I'm handicapped.
But there is hope for Americans looking for employment. Grocery and food delivery services like Instacart, Postmates, and Grubhub have reported record demands. Instacart alone has hired or plans to hire more than 500,000 shoppers. Walmart announced it would hire another 200,000 employees to keep up with demand. And as more people shop from home, Amazon said it would hire 75,000 more workers, and FedEx has over 850 positions it's looking to hire. Pharmacies could be another good place to look. CVS has reported sales through the roof. And with so many offices and buildings forced to close, demands for private security to watch over these places has gone up. As some states allow businesses to slowly open back up across the country, people are grateful to be back on the job, including this restaurant owner and his staff in Florida.
We're ready, let's go. We got the place COVID cleaned last week. We have the staff doing their thing with the cleaning. We're taking temperatures of the staff coming in.
In Washington, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, doctors here in the U.S. are closely monitoring a new illness after affecting children that may be related to COVID-19. The condition, being referred to as pediatric multisystem inflammatory syndrome, is believed to affect blood vessels and organs. Symptoms include a persistent fever, rash, abdominal pain, as well as vomiting. Joining me now on Skype is Dr. Michelle Cretella, Executive Director of the American College of Pediatricians. She is also a member of the Catholic Medical Association's Health Policy Committee. Doctor, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here.
All right, so what do we know so far about this connection between COVID-19 and this condition in children?
It's actually a new, we're having cases that are being newly reported now, and it's actually quite rare. So it's on the horizon. It's what we're watching and investigating more at this moment. Overwhelmingly, COVID-19 in children is very mild, and very few kids have been hospitalized with it. I mean, in fact, those children who do become hospitalized the vast majority have underlying medical issues like asthma, diabetes, or cystic fibrosis. To give a comparison with the seasonal flu, the CDC recently reported that 166 pediatric deaths occurred this season due to the flu. Only 3 pediatric deaths have been associated with COVID-19. So the overall pediatric
Doctor,
picture
if you don't mind,
is much more hopeful.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I want to go back to the syndrome that we're seeing right now, this connection between COVID-19 and this inflammatory condition in children. Why does it seem to be affecting children more? I mean, we're not hearing about this in adults.
So Kawasaki's is the name of the syndrome, and we actually do not know the mechanism behind this Kawasaki's inflammatory syndrome. It's more common in pediatrics. It's a pediatric condition, particularly in the Asian population. There's a slightly greater incidence of Kawasaki's in boys versus girls. It has been associated, it's probably triggered by our own, the child's own immune system reacting to whether there have been bacteria and different viruses implicated. So this is a syndrome that's not specific to COVID-19. It's a syndrome that pediatricians and scientists have been studying and following for decades, and we still don't know all the causative factors. The concern is that it can cause inflammation of the coronary arteries in the heart. And so this is why these children they'll present with maybe red eyes, a red peeling skin rash, and swollen limbs. They're treated in the hospital, just supportive measures to prevent damage to those heart arteries.
Well, Doctor, thank you so much for coming on the show and shedding light on this subject. We really appreciate your time. Dr. Michelle Cretella, Executive Director of the American College of Pediatricians. Thank you again. The Archdiocese of Detroit says it will resume all public masses May 29th, but individual pastors may begin doing so starting Tuesday. In a letter to the faithful, Archbishop Alan Vigneron notes other parts of the state are reopening and says, quote, "It is necessary that we make similar arrangements within our local church to allow once again for the communal celebration of Holy Mass, which at its core is the most essential activity known to our world. The services will feature strict social distancing and other guidelines." Up next, Pope Francis says a good prayer includes telling God everything. hear about the 5 million rosaries for Our Lady of Fatima. Pope Francis says Christian prayer is both trusting and confident.
Il tu che il mio io sta cercando.
At his weekly talk at the Vatican, the Holy Father says the God we seek is not shrouded in mystery. Instead, we can ask him for anything and tell him everything. Pope Francis also says that we should always approach God without any fear. For the first time in its history, the Shrine of Our Lady of Fatima celebrated the May 13th anniversary of the 1917 Marian apparitions without the presence of the public due to COVID-19 concerns. Cardinal Antonio Marto, the Bishop of Lady of Fatima, offered Mass today via live stream, calling for conversion and dedication to the Rosary in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Today's feast day marks the first of the apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary to 3 Portuguese shepherd children. Joining me now on Skype from the National Blue Army Shrine of Our Lady of Fatima in Washington, New Jersey, is Dave Carollo, Executive Director of the World Apostolate of Fatima USA. David, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, the global pandemic has impacted so many of the ways that we live and traditionally celebrate now. How are you commemorating today here in the U.S.?
Well, just like in Fatima, we had a virtual event, although our shrine here in Washington, New Jersey is 150 acres, more like a park. So people were on the grounds. We allowed it. Our gift shop is open. That's been reopened recently, although I have to follow all of the rules. Our Mass and our devotions were virtual. Of course, we were, good, not as good as having the 3,000 to 5,000 people that would typically be here today, but and we had beautiful weather, but it is what it is. But it was good, and I think we reached many people virtually. So this is what it is. It's kind of sad that we're in these times, and of course that the shrine in Washington, in Fatima, did not have a crowd. Usually you could see maybe 250,000 people there on a day like this. So it was an interesting time. We're in an interesting time, I guess, is the way to put it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Despite these interesting times, though, what do you hope people will take away spiritually from this kind of virtual pilgrimage?
Well, Tracy, I think I think people understand that what we do is in our hearts, not necessarily in what we physically do. We come here, we pray as a group, and that's beautiful, as they do in Fatima. But it's in your heart. Many people who participated virtually, although I realize it's not the same, it's your intention. God knows what we want. Our Lady knows. And I think maybe this time of deprivation, both from this and from the Mass and everything, is a time for us to reflect and really appreciate what we have in our faith and really yearn for it when it comes back, hopefully soon. And when it does come back, we have to embrace it very strongly. I think that's going to be the fruit of this difficult time. I truly do.
Yeah, absolutely. David, can we talk about World Rosary 2020? It's been described as a spiritual bouquet.
Yes. And that's an initiative of our organization worldwide, our international organization. We're doing it here, of course. We here in the United States started this year with, I had a conversation with a bishop who was our Episcopal advisor, and he said, we have to have a 2020 vision this year for our faith. And I said, I love that. Well, we started sort of an initiative, and then this initiative came from our international group. And I said, this is wonderful. So we're participating, as are many and other organizations. And I know this morning, I believe like 900,000 rosaries alone were offered to Our Lady as part of the spiritual bouquet. And there'll be more throughout the year. And of course, they're participating in other places. It's available on our website at bluearmy.com, World Rosary 2020. And it's part of an initiative. Prayer moves mountains, and I think this is the time we have to pray more than ever. And Our Lady has a solution. And maybe that's why we're going through difficult times right now, to wake us up again to that reality.
Yeah, well said, David. Before we let you go, during this time of upheaval, I'd like to ask you, what lessons are there from Fatima that we can apply now?
Well, I think if you look 100 years ago, when right after World War I, when the Spanish flu went through, isn't it interesting? It's 100 years now. The Spanish flu went through that, and two of the people that died from the Spanish flu were the two youngest seers of Fatima, Saint Jacinta and Francisco. Our Lady had said when they asked, "Will we go to heaven?" and she said to Jacinta and Francisco, "You will come soon, and of course, Lucia, you would stay longer to make me known and loved," and they did. But Our Lady had asked that are you willing to offer your lives in prayer and reparation for the conversion of sinners? And they said yes. And they suffered difficult deaths through this during that pandemic, but they were just models of prayer and offering their lives for the salvation of souls. And I think they probably saved numerous souls as a result of their sufferings and their offerings. So I think we can learn from that in this time of pandemic or in our lives in general with the little difficulties that we have, that we turn everything over and God is in charge. I think that's the important thing we should learn.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoyed this conversation with you. Stay safe.
You too. Thanks, Tracy. Great to see you. Bye now.
And a reminder that EWTN broadcasts Mass throughout the day. Mass airs at 8 a.m., noon, and 7 p.m. Eastern. We are also airing other special programming, including the Pope's Daily Mass. You can find our schedule at EWTN.com. There you will also find Eucharistic adoration throughout the day. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. We leave you tonight with more images from the shrine of Our Lady of Fatima in Portugal. Good night and God bless.